Okay, so picture this just for a second. It's early morning.
Like, really early.
Yeah, crack it on. Maybe 4.0 or 5.00 a.m. And the house is just completely silent. You're in that weird state between dreaming and being awake. And suddenly, you just hear your name called, clear as a bell. Not a whisper, a call.
Wow. That's startling.
And it is. Now, be honest. What is your immediate, your instinctual reaction to hearing your name called out of the void like that?
Oh, defense. 100%. My brain just goes straight into threat assessment mode. I'm asking, who is it? How did you get in here? Or what do you want?
Exactly. We want identifiers. We want the agenda.
Yeah.
We immediately try to gauge the situation. Is this an emergency? Is it a sales pitch? Do I need to be angry or helpful or scared?
Yeah, we need the data before we engage.
We want to see the contract before we even think about picking up the pen.
It's a protection mechanism. It has to be. We weigh the request against our energy, our budget, our safety.
But in the story we're unpacking today, the protagonist, he does the exact opposite. Before he knows why he is being called or what on earth is going to be asked of him,
Right, before anything.
before he even knows if it's good news or bad news, he answers with total, unrestricted availability. No instructions, no guarantees, just presence. He simply says, I am here.
Which, if you really sit with that for a moment, is a terrifying level of vulnerability. It's like writing a blank check with your life.
It really is. And that specific posture, that radical readiness, is the core of what we're exploring today. We are taking a deep dive into the Hebrew concept of Hineni.
Hineni, yeah, it's a fascinating word. It translates, directly to, here I am.
Here I am.
But as we're going to find out from these sources, this isn't just about location. It's not like dropping a pin on a map so someone can find you. It's not, I am in the kitchen. It's a posture of the soul, a statement of total attention.
And we have a stack of really fascinating material today, all focused on the narrative of Abraham in Genesis 2. Now, for those who know the text, this is the famous or maybe infamous story of the binding of Isaac. But we aren't just retelling a Bible story here. We are looking at it through a very specific analytical lens. Abraham, Hineni, before the cost is known.
And the mission of this deep dive is to understand a very counterintuitive idea. We usually think of leadership or courage or even deep faith as something you summon in the moment of crisis, like a shot of adrenaline.
Right. You rise to the occasion.
But the sources we have argue that true courage, it doesn't actually start when the crisis hits. It starts way, way before.
So let's get into the mechanics of this, because the source makes this really bold claim that obedience is a cultivated posture, not just some spur-of-the-moment decision. How does the text actually lay this out?
Well, to understand this, we have to look at what the source calls the radical order of operations.
The radical order of operations. I love that. It sounds like something from a math textbook.
It kind of is, syntactically. If you look at Genesis 22, verses 1 and 2, the sentence structure is incredibly specific. So God calls out, Abraham.
Okay.
And immediately, without any hesitation, Abraham answers, Hineni, here I am.
So he answers the call.
Yeah.
That seems polite, at least.
But look at the sequence. He answers the person. He answers the who. And it's only after he says Hineni, only after he has committed his full presence and attention, that God drops the command.
And what a command.
Oh, it's a command that would shatter anyone. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, and offer him.
That is just so heavy. But the key insight you're pointing to is the timing. He didn't get the contract, read the fine print, call his lawyer, and then sign it.
No.
He signed it before he ever saw the document.
Precisely. The response comes before the instruction. Abraham commits to the relationship before knowing the requirement. And to really grasp how wild this is, you have to look at the historical context the source provides about the ancient Near East.
Right, because we can't just read this with 21st century eyes. Context is king. So what was the standard operating procedure for gods and men back then?
Well, in that era, relationships with deities were almost entirely transactional.
A business deal.
A business deal. You do this ritual, you sacrifice that goat, you say these specific words, and in return, the god gives you rain, or a good harvest, or victory in battle. It was fear-based compliance. You pay the bribe to avoid the wrath.
So it's I do X, you give me Y. It's basically a vending machine god.
Right, and if machine eats your dollar, you kick it. But Abraham's response is so different. It's distinctively relational. It stems from intimacy. He isn't trying to manipulate a result. He's responding to a voice he knows.
A voice he trusts.
Exactly. The source argues that this obedience is relational, not transactional. He isn't asking, what's in it for me? He's asking, Lord, what do you need?
That is a massive shift in mindset. But I want to play devil's advocate for a second. When we hear stories like this, we tend to put people like Abraham on a pedestal, you know. We think he was just built different.
Oh, absolutely.
That he was born with this superpower of instant heroism.
We think he just woke up that morning, had his coffee, and decided to be a giant of faith for the day. But the source material pushes back so hard on that, it calls it the myth of instant heroism.
So he wasn't an overnight success story.
Not at all. I mean, think about it. If you tried to run a marathon tomorrow without any training, you'd collapse at mile 2. This readiness, this Hineni, was formed over decades. The text calls it covenantal trust. You have to look at the backstory.
Okay, what backstory specifically? Where's the training montage?
Well, you have to go back decades.
Yeah.
In Genesis 12, he's told to just leave his home in Ur for a land he had never even seen.
Right.
That was the first rep, you know? He had to leave everything familiar based on a voice.
The first trust fall.
Exactly.
Well.
Then he faces famine and has to trust for provision. And he fails a few times, by the way. He tries to fix things himself. Then there was that agonizing, decades-long wait for a son in his old age.
So this wasn't his first rodeo.
Not even close. And the source uses this great analogy. Think of Hineni as a muscle.
A muscle.
Yes. You don't just walk into the gym and bench press 300 pounds. You build that capacity over years of incremental lifting. Abraham's ability to say, here I am on Mount Moriah, when the stakes were just impossibly high, his own son, that was the result of years of incremental obedience.
Incremental obedience. I like that term. Makes it feel more attainable, you know, for the rest of us. It implies that the small yes you say today actually matters for the crisis you might face 10 years from now.
That's it. You are building the capacity for the crisis in the quiet moments. There's a quote from one of the sources that sums this up perfectly. Mastery of response is cultivated long before the crisis arrives.
That's really good. And the source actually connects this to some other historical figures, right? To show this isn't just some ancient biblical thing, but a pattern of leadership.
Right. It brings up figures like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and William Wilberforce. These were people who embodied what it calls anticipatory obedience.
Unpack that for us. Bonhoeffer, the German theologian.
Yes. So Bonhoeffer was resisting Nazi tyranny years before he was arrested. He was writing and speaking against it when it was just unpopular, long before it was deadly. He couldn't have known the full personal cost, which, you know, ended up being his life. But he had already cultivated a posture of obedience to his conviction.
So he was practicing Hineni before the Gestapo ever knocked on his door.
That's a great way to put it. And Wilberforce, fighting slavery. He fought for decades before the societal framework shifted to support him. He suffered political isolation, health issues. But he was responding to a call before the success was ever visible. They said, here I am, to the cause, before they knew if they'd win.
That is powerful. Okay, but here's where it gets really, really difficult for me. I will go back to the text. The source talks about the Isaac dilemma, because we have to understand what Isaac actually meant to Abraham. He wasn't just a kid he loved.
No.
Isaac represented something massive, didn't he?
This is the absolute crux of the tension, and it's why this story is so distressing to read. Isaac was the child of promise. God had specifically said that through this boy, nations would be blessed. Isaac was the living, breathing proof that God keeps his word. He was the future, the legacy.
So the command to sacrifice Isaac wasn't just cruel, it was contradictory.
Yes.
It was God telling Abraham to destroy the very promise that God himself had given him.
It's a paradox, a total logical collision. How can you obey a command that seems to nullify the very promise you're living for? And the source dives into this promise versus command tension beautifully.
It just seems irrational. I mean, if I'm Abraham, I'm saying, God, you made a mistake. You said Isaac is the future. If I kill the future, you're a liar.
And that's why this is the ultimate test. The source explains that faith isn't about resolving that contradiction immediately with your logic. It's about being willing to walk in the tension.
Walking in the tension, that sounds exhausting.
It is. Abraham had to hold the promise in one hand and the command in the other. He didn't drop either one. He didn't say, God is a liar, and he didn't say, I won't do it. He just walked up the mountain holding both. And this leads to a really important distinction the source makes about fear.
Yeah, because we usually think faith means no fear. Like if you're afraid, you aren't trusting enough.
And that is such a damaging misconception. Hineni does not mean the absence of fear. The text suggests Abraham likely felt grief, anxiety, immense moral turmoil. I mean, can you imagine? He is a father walking his son to his death.
Right, he's human. He's not some robot programmed to obey.
But the source defines faith here not as fearlessness, but as courage to act in alignment with God's will despite inner turmoil. Surrender is active, not passive.
Okay.
It's moving your feet while your heart is pounding out of your chest. It is saying, here I am, while your voice shakes.
That makes the story feel so much more real. He was a dad walking up a mountain with a breaking heart, but still walking.
And that walking leads us to the climax, the moment of intervention.
Right. So they get to the top, the altar's built. He binds his son, which is a whole other level of trust from Isaac, by the way. And just as he's about to go through with it,
The angel of the Lord stops him. Do not lay a hand on the boy. And then Abraham looks up, and he sees a ram caught in a thicket by its horns,
the substitute.
the substitute. But here's the lesson on provision that the source emphasizes, and it's critical for anyone listening who feels stuck in a waiting period. Provision arrives at the point of ultimate surrender, not before.
So if he had stopped halfway up the mountain and said, God, show me the ram and then I'll keep going, it wouldn't work.
Exactly. If he had demanded to see the solution before saying Hineni, the test of faith is completely void. Theologically, this connects to the name Abraham gives the place, Jehovah-Jireh.
Which means the Lord will provide.
Yes. But notice the timing. He names it that after the test. It reinforces that our faith has to rely on God's character, not on visible outcomes. You have to walk up the mountain empty-handed to find the provision at the top.
That is tough. That's so tough because we live in a world where we want the data first. We want the trajectory, the ROI, the guarantee. We treat life like a supply chain problem.
Right.
We want to know the inventory's in stock before we place the order.
We want the ram in the thicket before we even saddle the donkey.
Exactly. Show me the ram and I'll saddle up. I'll go anywhere you want. Just show me the safety net first. But that's not how this logic works. So, okay, let's pivot. What does this mean for us? For the listener right now who might be prepping for a board meeting or leading a team or just trying to navigate a career change, we aren't being asked to sacrifice our kids on mountains.
Thankfully not. That was a one-time historical event. But the source argues we all have our Isaacs.
Okay, let's unpack that concept. What defines a modern-day Isaac?
An Isaac is anything you hold most dear. It's the thing that if you had to let go of it, you feel like your world or even God's promise for your life would just collapse. It represents your future.
So like a career ambition.
Absolutely. Your professional reputation, a
Yeah.
specific relationship, a sense of financial security or control. It's that one thing where you say, God, I'll do anything, but just don't touch that.
Don't pitch that. Yeah, we all have those. The do not enter signs we put on our hearts. The source actually gives some specific modern examples that I found really grounding.
Yes, these anecdotes really help translate the ancient into the modern. There was the story of Sarah, the business leader.
Right, the executive.
She was climbing the ladder, incredibly busy. Her time was her Isaac. She guarded it fiercely because her time meant her success. But she felt this tug, a call to mentor young women.
And usually the excuse is, I'm too busy, I'll do it when I retire.
Right. But she practiced Hineni. She said, here I am, to just one meeting. She didn't overhaul her life overnight. She just surrendered an hour of her calendar. And that grew into this transformative network that actually ended up redefining her career.
So she gave a little bit of presence, and it multiplied.
Then there was Maria, the nurse. This one was even higher stakes. She felt called to serve in a rural mission hospital. She didn't know the living conditions. She didn't know the financial outcome talk about not knowing the cost.
That's a direct hit to the security, Isaac.
It is. But her obedience transformed that community. And then there was Daniel, the engineer. He left a corporate career for a mission field with political instability. And that's a huge Isaac stability, safety, a predictable ladder to climb.
It seems like in all these stories, the common thread is letting go of the need to control the outcome.
That's it. It's releasing the how and trusting the who. It's realizing that you are not the general manager of the universe.
Which is a hard resignation letter to sign. The source actually offers a practical exercise for this, a prayer of surrender. I thought this was really useful because surrender can feel like such a vague spiritual buzzword.
Just surrender it, brother.
Right. But this breaks it down.
It does. It's a 3-step process to move from anxiety to availability. Step 1 is simple. Acknowledge the call. Just say, Lord, here I am. It's positioning yourself. You stop running.
Just showing up. Getting in the room.
Step 2 is crucial, and we often skip it. Name the fear. Don't pretend you aren't afraid. Name the emotion. I'm terrified of losing my status. I'm worried about money. I'm afraid I'll look foolish.
Get it out in the open. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
And then step 3, release the specific Isaac. Release the outcome to God. It's saying, I am trusting you with the result of this obedience. You're detaching your obedience from the outcome.
It sounds simple, but I bet that's incredibly hard to do in the moment.
It's the hardest thing we do. It's why the Source calls it a muscle. You have to practice it on the small things, the small inconveniences, the minor calls to generosity, so that when the big Isaac moment comes, you have the strength to let go.
So coming full circle to where we started, we're talking about Hineni.
A readiness that speaks before the command, that trusts before the evidence, and obeys before the clarity.
And I want to push on the why one last time. In a world of information overload, where you and I, and probably everyone listening, are obsessed with getting all the data before we make a move, why does this matter? Why should we care about an ancient nomad's mindset?
Because waiting for perfect clarity is a trap. We call it analysis paralysis, right? If you wait until you know the cost, the opportunity has often passed. This posture, it gives you a countercultural advantage. It allows for decisive movement. It allows you to step into opportunities that logic would talk you out of, but that lead to the most transformative moments of your life.
It turns hesitation into movement.
Exactly. It moves you from a place of calculation to a place of creation and connection. It connects you to a purpose bigger than your own safety. And frankly, it's a much more exciting way to live.
I love that. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, the Source leaves us with a final provocation that I think is going to stick with me for a while. It's a question that demands an answer.
It's a haunting and beautiful question.
What is the Isaac in your life right now?
Mm.
What is that one thing God might be asking you to trust him with? And here's the kicker. Are you willing to say, here I am, before you know what it's going to cost you?
That's the question.
Something to think about on your commute or your run or wherever you are. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.